This week on Jerusalem Dateline, the U.S. Embassy makes the move to Jerusalem.
On behalf of the 45th President of the United States of America, we welcome you officially and for the first time to the Embassy of the United States here in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel.
Plus, Guatemala joins the U.S. in moving its embassy to Jerusalem, and Palestinian violence breaks out on the Gaza border, supposedly in reaction to the embassy move. But what's really behind the riots? Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell, coming to you this week with the city of Jerusalem behind me. 70 years to the day and almost the very hour after President Truman recognized Israel on May 14, 1948, the United States moved its embassy to Jerusalem. Take a look at what many people believe was history in the making. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin unveiled the seal, and Ivanka Trump introduced the new embassy.
On behalf of the 45th President of the United States of America, we welcome you officially and for the first time to the Embassy of the United States here in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel.
In a video, her father, President Trump, said his decision acknowledged reality.
Israel is a sovereign nation with the right, like every other sovereign nation, to determine its own capital. Yet for many years we failed to acknowledge the obvious, the plain reality that Israel's capital is Jerusalem.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called it historic.
What a glorious day. Remember this moment. President Trump, by recognizing history, you have made history.
Ambassador David Friedman hosted the event and told CBN News how he felt about the historic day.
We've been planning for this for 25 years, and thank God it came. It was just an incredible moment, one that will probably take me weeks for me to process all my emotions.
After nearly 23 years, the Jerusalem Embassy Act has been fulfilled, with the Embassy of the United States of America here in Jerusalem. But some say it's not just history in the making, but also prophecy in action.
We're seeing prophecy unfold. I don't know when the Lord's coming back, but I know today it got a little bit closer.
This is also a prophetic moment because God promised Israel in the book of Deuteronomy concerning the nations, I will make you the head and not the tail.
Others saw it as Israel taking its place among the nations.
One of the most visible manifestations of the double standard, it was the only country in the world not allowed to announce its own capital. I hope we see the beginning of the end of that. And for the Israeli people, they will be treated like first-class citizens of the world.
It also tells Israel's enemies, this is their capital, the American embassy's here, now deal with it.
Meanwhile, thousands of Palestinians rioted along the Israeli-Gaza border to protest the embassy move and also mark what they call the Nakba, the catastrophe that befell Palestinians when Israel was created. During the riots, Gazan officials said more than 50 died and hundreds more were wounded. The IDF drew up thousands of leaflets warning protesters to stay away from the border and blame the Hamas terror group for the uprising.
We will not tolerate this violence. We will continue to defend our sovereignty, our civilians, and our border. We will do so while trying to minimize the amount of casualties, but we will not let the rioters through and to harm Israeli civilians that are a running distance away.
Israel said captured Gazans told them Hamas encourages children to cross the fence. They said they want the riots to be seen internationally as a popular uprising and not inspired by Hamas. Trump's history-making decision has already had an impact on other nations and opened the door for other countries to follow. Guatemala followed the United States just 2 days later. On December 25, 2017, Guatemalan President Jimmy Morales announced his country would move its embassy to Jerusalem. Today, it becomes the second nation after the United States to officially do so. CBN News got the first interview with the president in Israel.
Guatemala has been a blessed nation, and I believe we have had an excellent relationship with the people of Israel since the foundation of the State of Israel with the President Arevalo Bermejo in 1948. And since then, we've had excellent relations, and we have to strengthen them, and I believe we'll be receiving blessings for both peoples by doing the right thing.
At the opening, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed Guatemala's president and cited the historic relationship between Israel and Guatemala.
There's a Guatemala Street in many cities and many communities in Israel because we remember our friends, and Guatemala is our friend.
And it's a very brave decision. It's a historic decision, and we are happy about this. It's, as the president has said, it's the correct decision.
Sarah Angelina Solis is the Guatemalan ambassador to Israel.
Guatemala was also the first country in the world to establish an embassy in Jerusalem in 1956. The first country in the world. So now we add another milestone to this history, that is the return of the embassy to Jerusalem.
Guatemala has a history of supporting Israel. In 1948, it joined the U.S. in recognizing the Jewish state, after President Harry Truman did so, following David Ben-Gurion's declaration of Israel's independence.
There are very few countries that have this kind of history.
Yeah.
So we feel very close to the state of Israel, and we have created a unique friendship.
Israeli leaders, including Michael Oren, see the U.S. and Guatemala as just the beginning.
We've had intimations from the Czech Republic, from Hungary, some Latin American countries as well. We'll be eagerly awaiting them, and there'll be very nice places available in Jerusalem.
This is not the end of a process. I believe actually it's the beginning of a process. What the US administration and President Trump was doing, I think, he was in a way shooting the starting shot for a race. And I believe there will be many other nations that will follow the United States.
Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat helped facilitate the move of the Guatemalan embassy.
They're very cheerful and happy and good people, and I'm very proud of our partners in Guatemala. So that would be the second embassy moving.
I was amazed by the innumerable amount of congratulatory messages that the embassy received, not only from Israel, but from all over the world, in many languages, from Africa, from Europe, from Latin America, saying, congratulations, Guatemala, we support you. They were saying, our country should do the same. Our president should take that decision.
And that's where Guatemala comes in. It has one of the highest percentages of evangelical Christians in the world, and one reason why the country is on its way to Jerusalem.
People in Guatemala pray for the peace in this region, pray for Jerusalem, and they are excited. They call me, it's an honor that it was during your term. I feel privileged. I feel moved. I feel that this is a gift from God.
The same day as the U.S. Embassy moved to Jerusalem, Palestinians rioted along the Gaza-Israeli border. More than 60 Palestinians were killed as they tried to rush the fence and get inside Israel. And fallout continues throughout the Middle East. Turkey expelled Israel's ambassador, and it's one more sign that this former ally is embracing radical Islam. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan labeled Israel's acts along the Gaza border as genocide. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu shot back, stating, Erdogan is among Hamas's biggest supporters, and there is no doubt that he well understands terrorism and slaughter. I suggest that he not preach morality to us. Other nations also criticized Israel, specifically blaming the move of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem for the unrest. America's UN Ambassador Nikki Haley put the blame solely on Hamas and Iran.
In recent days, Hamas terrorists, backed by Iran, have incited attacks against Israeli security forces and infrastructure. Those who suggest that the Gaza violence has anything to do with the location of the American embassy are sorely mistaken. Rather, the violence comes from those who reject the existence of the State of Israel in any location.
This idea video shows thousands of Gazans trying to breach Israel's border, while this footage documented a Hamas squad armed with grenades and weapons trying to cut through the fence. The IDF identified 24 of the dead as known terrorists. Hamas also attacked the Kerem Shalom crossing. CBN News has reported it's the crossing where Israel daily sends tons of food, fuel, and materials inside Gaza for its people. Despite the evidence, Turkish President Erdogan still condemned Israel and backed its longtime Muslim Brotherhood ally, Hamas.
Turkey is moving away from its former role as a reliable Western ally and as a NATO member in good standing, and more towards a sense that Turkey is a state deeply tinged with Islamist ideology and acting according to a sectarian and quite dangerous agenda in the neighborhood.
Spire says Erdogan has embarked on an historic mission to transform Turkey from a secular republic to an Islamic state. As we said, more than 60 Palestinians died in confrontations with Israel as they tried to breach the border between Gaza and Israel. Much of the international media portrayed it as Israelis killing innocent, unarmed Palestinians. Hamas officials tell a different story. Much of the coverage of Monday's riot seemed to show one side of the story, an uprising to protest the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. But Memory, the Middle East Media Research Institute, released a compilation of videos following Monday's confrontations that give a much different perspective. For example, this Hamas official admitted on Palestinian television that 50 of the 62 people killed were Hamas members. Mahmoud Zahar, a senior Hamas official, said this on the Al Jazeera network.
This is a clear terminological deception. So when we talk about peaceful resistance, we're deceiving the public. This is a peaceful resistance bolstered by military force and by security agencies.
The videos show tire-burning and wire-cutting units saying their highest aspiration is to die for the sake of Allah, or to take down the border fence with the fingernails of their children. Israeli Ambassador Danny Danon called this a Palestinian cycle of death.
First, they incite people to violence. Then they place as many civilians as possible, including women and children, in the line of fire to maximize civilian casualties. Then they blame Israel, and then they come here to complain to the UN.
Even this Palestinian Authority official blamed the PA's rival, Hamas.
Seriously? Sending children to be killed or lose a limb while your leaders are having a good time?
More demonstrations are planned, and tragically, more Palestinian children may die or lose limbs and be crippled for life. Coming up, U.S. Ambassador to Israel says President Trump doesn't get credit for the good things he does. Just one day after the historic move of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, I sat down with U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman. Friedman reflected on what the day meant to him and what his dad would have thought of it. And he told us a little-known story about President Trump.
The inspiration was palpable, and candidly, there was a little bit of relief because we've been planning for this. We've been planning for this for 25 years, and thank God it came. It was just an incredible moment, one that will probably take me weeks for me to process all my emotions. My father dedicated his life to the Jewish people. He was a very prominent rabbi, and Israel to him was the culmination of all the hopes and prayers of the Jewish people for thousands of years. And of course, my father was of the generation that survived the Holocaust. So the juxtaposition of those great losses and the creation of Israel had a profound effect upon him. And that's how I grew up. And so to see this happen, as I was standing there, I couldn't stop thinking about how proud my father would be and how much I wish that he would be alive to see this day. President Trump is a very good man, and it's not a description I give of many people. He's a good man. He doesn't get credit for all the good things he's done. I've seen many of his acts of kindness, many of his acts of charity to others, and of course, Going back to my father, when I was mourning my father, I remember it was a day in February, there was a complete blizzard on Long Island. And, we said Shiva for 7 days, and so people come to visit the house. And no one was coming that day because there was this massive blizzard. And all of a sudden, in he walks. It took him 3.5 hours in a car to get out to visit me. This was about 13, 14 years ago, long before, politics was on the horizon. Nobody was there, no press, nothing. He didn't get, it's not like he did it for any coverage. And we sat for 2 hours, and he talked about his father. I talked about my father. And we're really lucky to have him in the White House. It's great to see how these communities are growing closer and closer together based upon a common love of the land of Israel, the people of Israel, the destiny of Israel. It's really a game changer for Israel's stability and security in the region. The Jewish people are a small nation. The Christian community is not a small community. For Israel to have these types of friends, it's really unprecedented and very much appreciated. I know the Prime Minister is deeply appreciative of the evangelical Christian community, as am I, as is President Trump.
Up next, see why the U.S. and Guatemalan embassy moves make a great victory for faith-based diplomacy. Advocates say the move of the U.S. and Guatemalan embassies from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem marked a great victory for faith-based diplomacy. The Knesset Christian Allies Caucus held a special meeting at the Knesset to honor the U.S. and Guatemala, and many gave the credit to God. Here's what some Israelis and Americans had to say.
This week was the greatest victory in the history of faith-based diplomacy. We knew that for dozens and dozens of years there were millions and hundreds of millions of Christians praying for the peace of Jerusalem and the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. But today, this week, those prayers were answered.
Everyone was a part of the reason why the embassy opened, and no one could take the credit for it, because this was something that occurred so miraculous that it was clearly coming from the right arm of a sovereign God.
Ever since the leaders of North Korea and South Korea met, ever since the Iranian deal was canceled, and with the exclamation saying that there is no compromise with evil, and ever since the embassy was moved, the United States embassy moved to Jerusalem. You know what's shocking in the Israeli secular press? They can't get over one thing. Why are you mentioning God so many times?
By denying our connection to Jerusalem, actually it's also the denial of Christianity.
Because what happened in Jerusalem this week, and I want to paraphrase John Hagee, will echo in the halls of Damascus, it will reverberate in the streets of Tehran, and not just on a religious level.
But it's not the last battle in the world's war against Israel. My message was, though we are celebrating and jubilant, we must continue to be vigilant. We must continue to work to break down the barriers of misunderstanding in the world.
Coming up, To Life, see how Israeli volunteers go out of their way to help Syrian refugees. To honor Israel's 70th anniversary, CBN Documentaries produced To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world. Take a look at how Israeli volunteers helped Syrian refugees fleeing their own civil war when they landed on a Greek island.
The Greek island of Lesbos. A quiet vacation spot where tourists relax and local children play in peace. But on the other side of the island, a very different scene is unfolding. Every day, thousands of refugees arrive on this shore. Most are fleeing the Syrian civil war, hoping to resettle in Europe.
We see babies
which are only a few days old people at the age of 90, 95 even. And we get mainly people from Syria, also from Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran.
Waiting to help them on the beaches of Greece are the last people the Syrians might expect. Volunteers from Israel.
My name is Tali Shaltiel. I'm here with Israel, an Israeli-based NGO.
My name is Majida Kardosh. I'm here as a medical team. I work as a nurse.
My name is Iris Adler. I live in Tel Aviv. I just finished med school in Tel Aviv University. I came here through Israel to be on the coast as a doctor.
My name is Manal Shadi. I'm from Nazareth, and I'm the team lead of Israel in Greece.
The Israel team is a mix of doctors and nurses, both Arab and Jewish.
I am a Palestinian citizen of Israel. Arabic is my mother tongue. I'm also Christian, so I'm a minority inside of a minority inside of Israel. Being aware of my history, my background, where I come from, the history that my people went through, this is something that appeals to me, and I can help refugees. So this is my job, and this is what I should be doing.
The film really does tell an amazing story about what Israeli volunteers are doing around the world. If you would like to order your own copy, please go to cbn.com. Well, that's it for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.